So, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us on our Lovely People webinar. Oh, we just had Carrie jump on as well. Nice to see you. Well, not see you this evening, Carrie. So tonight, our guest is the lovely Chana Studley. So it's really great to meet you because I haven't actually met you in person, but I know recently you've got a book out. And it would be really, really great to hear a little bit about you and how you came across this understanding and maybe how the book came about. And let's see what happens from there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And I apologize. I should have explained how to pronounce my name. It was my fault. It's actually Hannah. So, yeah, no problem. So you can forget the CH. Just think Hannah, like that's how you say it in English. That's totally fine. Cool. So let's see, I came across the principles about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Okay. And I was actually having breakfast with a friend of mine who was visiting from Los Angeles. I live in Jerusalem. And we'd been talking for like 2 hours, catching up about everything. We used to work together in LA. And she said to me, I went to this amazing workshop yesterday. I think you'd really like it. I said, okay, what was that? And she's like, well, it just cracked me up because we've been talking for 2 hours, and then suddenly this woman who was very articulate was speechless and she couldn't put it into words. And I was like, well, how amazing was it if you can't explain it? And she said, so I tried to prompt her. I said, is it an exercise thing? Is it a diet? Is it a philosophy? And she's like, no. So anyway, we were in a coffee shop and she wrote on a napkin, she wrote Sydney Banks, Mind, Thought, and Consciousness on this napkin and pushed it across the table to me. She says, go look it up. I think you'll like it. And so I went home and I put on my computer and I put Sydney Banks into YouTube, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. It was like I'd been on this journey for maybe 30 years of learning how to understand the human experience and tried many different things, methods and techniques, and certified in this, that, and the other. And it was funny. One of the first teachers I ever spoke to was Charles Rosenblatt. He was visiting Jerusalem to promote his book that he'd written. And, I had a meeting with him and I said, it's like I found a vocabulary to explain what I've been thinking. And because I always knew that I'm not my thoughts, and I knew the problem was in my head. I just needed to be pointed a bit more in that direction to really see that that's how we all experience life. And so like all the teachers like just really gave me a vocabulary for what I was been fumbling around with on my own for a long time. So yes, that's how I came across the principles. So yeah. And then you asked about, so I guess I just wrote a book. It came out in January. It's going really well. And it's called The Myth of Low Self-Esteem. And it is a novel. People have been saying to me for a long time, you should write a book, because I've had quite an adventurous life, to put it mildly. I worked in Hollywood for about 20 years. Oh, wow. And yeah, so people would say to me, oh, you should write a book about all your Hollywood adventures. And I was like, okay. And then other people would say to me, you should write a book about, I went through a lot of trauma in my 20s. And so people said you should write about that and recovering from trauma. And then I've done a lot of traveling. I've moved countries, and changed careers. And so I just kind of like thought, what, I'm going to put it all in one book, make a story out of it. I came up with a character, and her name's Debra, and she kind of lives this life that's kind of loosely, you can tell it's like a lot of my stories, because at the time, I didn't think of myself as a writer. I thought, I actually hadn't written anything since I was in high school. In fact, I mean, you're English, so you'll get this. I failed my English language O-level 4 times. Right? I got 4 Ds. At least I was consistent. A consistently bad speller. And so that had kind of put a story in my head that I'm not a writer, I'm not academic. And I was very, very lucky in that I did very well being creative and artistic with my hands. And I was, I got a lot of compliments and was very successful with what I could do with my hands. And I'd never done anything with like my brain, at least I thought I hadn't. And so when I wrote the book, I was kind of convinced this was it. This is my one chance. We all have one novel inside of us. And so I wrote the book, and the day after I finished it, I printed it out to, I wanted to get some feedback from somebody, which is actually probably one of the scariest things I've ever done, you know, to like actually show my writing to somebody. And I printed it out and showed it to Shifra Rosenblatt, you know, who lives here, Shal Rosenblatt's daughter, because I wanted some feedback about, you know, from someone who had had experience with the principles. And the next day I woke up with the idea for about 4 more stories. And it was like, it was such an amazing experience, because here I was telling myself, this is it, you have one chance, you know, your one book. And then my imagination the next day, once I let go of it and handed it to somebody else, my imagination was going bum, 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 bum. And it was almost painful, you know, like the creativity was just like coming out. And I have at least 4 more books in my head that I can write now, stories, novels, which kind of explain the principles from in different situations, because I think there's so much misinformation out there. People are suffering. There's a lot of suffering, you know, mental health wise, and so I've kind of decided I could take these different situations and turn them into novels and put the information out that way, because, you know, like tired moms and overwhelmed teachers don't really have the time to read research books, and some people find those kind of books really boring or too heavy. Whereas a novel is much more accessible. So I'm hoping that that's what a vehicle for helping people, you know, hear about these ideas.
Yeah, I think stories are a great way. I mean, we tell the stories, don't we? When people share the principles, I know when I share, one of the things I do is talk about the story that happened to me this morning, the story that happened to me yesterday.
Right.
We live in
yeah.
Don't we? We live in our own novel.
Right. Yes. Yes. And that was kind of one of the things I put in the book about how, you know, we create this story about ourselves and then we get very attached to it, and that's what actually happened to me. I was mugged 3 times in my 20s. One about 2 years apart each incident. I mean, it's bad enough, I mean, for anybody to be mugged 1 time, but then it happened again, and then a 3rd time. And I received quite serious injuries each time. Like my skull was fractured the first time. The second time, 3 men, this happened in Manchester, 3 men beat me, left me on a piece of waste ground. And then the 3rd time, my neck was actually broken. I mean, thank God the spinal cord was only bruised, but the vertebrae C2 and C3 were broken. And so I had this story in my head that if I go out the front door, I'm going to get hurt. You know, it's like, I got kind of sick from that story. I mean, like now it's called PTSD. I mean, this was in the 1980s. And this, you know, that diagnosis, that label was only just going into the DSM at the time. So I just sat at home and relived all these traumas over and over and over again, because I didn't know what else to do. And then it became reality. And it became such a strong story in my head that I knew that if I went out my front door, a bus was going to run me over. And I lived in London at this point, and buses didn't even go down my street. I mean, that's how loopy I got. You know, it was like I really was losing it. And then afterwards, as I started getting well, I started like hearing myself tell this story that I was the girl who was attacked 3 times. You know, this kind of victim thing. It become who I was. And so I think the first time someone actually challenged me and said, you know, are you ready to let go of your story? I found that very threatening, because that was my identity. Who am I going to be? You know, like, how am I going to communicate with you if I can't tell you my stories of woe? And so I found it actually very, very threatening at first. And but I began to see, I was in so much pain and so miserable that I kind of like, I was like, okay, hands up, I can't carry on like this, you know, tell me what to do. And she's like, there's really nothing to do, just let go. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. You know, it's like when I work with people, you know, clients, I mean, I had someone here today and she's like, okay, I get it, but what do I do? You know, and I think we're often in that place where just tell me what to do, you know, like we're very fix it, do it kind of people. And I was like, I'll do anything. Like I was like, and she said, you know, just do the next right thing. And I'm like, but what does that look like? What do I wear? I don't know how to do this. You know, help me. And it really felt like she was kind of bringing me to the edge of a cliff. and asking me to jump off, and I didn't know how to do that. I was willing to do it, I just didn't know how. So the book is kind of like my own personal journey of since then of learning how to do that, how to fly, how to let go, and have have a new experience. Yeah.
That is really lovely. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So you've obviously given a little bit away about the book. Is there anything, any other little giveaways that you can do, tell us about, and some of the insights you've had, some of the other things that you've seen that maybe you share in the book, or maybe not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I called it The Myth of Low Self-Esteem, which kind of sounds like a self-help book, and that's kind of how it started out. I lived in California for about 16 years when I was working in the movie business, and when I first moved there, I was I'm very English, and I just fresh off the boat, and I was very struck about how people kept talking about their low self-esteem, and yet they were the most forgive me if there's any Californians watching, but like the most self-obsessed, self-possessed, self-centered kind of all about themselves, and they were talking about their low self-esteem in front of groups of people, and I was like, you don't have low self-esteem, and it reminded me of that Sydney Banks quote about like you're not insecure, you just think you are. And so I've always done coaching and counseling in between the movie work, because we'd often get I don't know, 2 or 3 months off in between movies sometimes. So I didn't just want to sit there. I would go work with people. And I remember having this client, and she was going on about her low self-esteem, and she was the most, like flipping her hair, and like very, very, very self-assured kind of person. And I said, what makes you think you have low self-esteem? And she's like, well, all my therapists tell me so. And I'm like, and what I found was when I started asking people questions, like where they thought this low self-esteem was coming from, it was usually some kind of anger or resentment that the world wasn't treating them right. And so I started seeing that that actually that was quite kind of interesting, because if I think I'm a piece of dirt and you treat me badly, then it would make sense that you treat me badly. That wouldn't, what grounds would I have to complain about? Because if that's my belief that I'm not much, and you ignore me, you don't pay me enough, or whatever it is, they were complaining about, then that would make sense. If you treat me badly, and I don't like that, that must mean I think better of myself, that I should be treated better. So I started pointing out the contradiction in this, and that's why I called it the myth of low self-esteem, because they were using this label, I mean, as far as I could see, as an I want to say an excuse, a way to get out of responsibility for their lives, because they were wanting to hide behind this and blame other people. And this got me thinking a lot, and I was thinking, I know I certainly did this. I'm talking about them. I was very much guilty of myself when I was in my very dark places, and I started seeing how that it ties in with that idea that my problem is out there. If I can just fix the problem out there, if I can fix you, if I can change this, if I can, there's always somewhere to get or somewhere to change, then I'll be okay, and then my self-esteem will be okay. But what I started seeing was actually their thinking, the quality of their thinking that was going up and down, not the real essential them. We're all, like wisdom, we're all pure, beautiful, naturally innately healthy people. And I kind of didn't have those words for it at the time, but I kind of knew that it was just their thinking that was going up and down. So I started pointing people in that direction, and some people were willing to hear it and some weren't. I'm not talking to you again, and they would leave and find somebody else to work with. But it just kind of like, I just found it very curious and interesting, and so that's kind of how the title of the book came about. And so the characters in the book kind of like go on this journey of exploring these ideas. And like I said, after I finished it, it's been actually quite an amazing experience just actually writing a book. It's a great opportunity to be very vulnerable. Because like in all the other creative work I've done, I've always been part of a team, like working on a movie or in the theater or teaching. It's like I'm like a team member, and writing the book was very much about, it's just me and this is who I am, and this is what I've done. And I can remember when I asked the first friend to read my writing, it was like, be nice, be gentle, I've never done this before, I'm really scared. And which is kind of weird, because I've done a lot more what you'd probably think of scary things in my life than pressing click and send, and sending that writing to somebody for their feedback. That was a big deal for me. Yeah.
It's those things that I think show us how crazy our thinking is. And like you said, it's only sometimes it takes somebody else to point out to us. So like you say about the low self-esteem, that can't actually be low self-esteem when you stop and think about it. What is actually going on? And I think our thinking and the way we go about our lives hides things from us in that way. And sometimes it does take someone else looking at us and saying,
right,
hear yourself. Can you hear what you're actually saying here?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So how has coming across this understanding, I know you said this put words on to something that you'd seen already, but how else has this impacted your life? Obviously it spurred you to write a book. What was it shifted and happened for you that inspired you in that way?
I think I started to really see how the experience is really an internal one. And it's funny, I was explaining this to a 20-year-old girl who was here, and I was trying to explain these ideas to her, and I wasn't sure if I was getting anywhere, because it was kind of hard to tell. And then she suddenly turned to me and she said, "You mean it's like we're all living in our own video game?" And I said, "Yes, that's brilliant. That is such a great explanation or analogy." And since then, it really, I don't know what it did for her, but it really helped me to kind of like really see how, this experience that I'm in, even right now, and I'm looking at my computer screen, and I can see you and a few other people, and it's like, it's kind of trippy, when you start thinking about it. Like, I mean, another example I could give is, like, I live in Israel, and we have a completely different calendar here. Like, first of all, we have a lunar calendar, not a solar one, and our holidays are completely different. Like, we're in a holiday right now, the holiday of Passover, and and so the other holidays from around the world can pass by, and we don't know anything about them. Like, everybody can be celebrating July 4th or Valentine's Day or whatever, and here we wouldn't know anything about it. And yet we're we see the same sky and get on the same airplanes and use the same internet, and we're living like kind of in a slightly alternate universe. I mean, I guess every country is in terms of this, but here it's just I'm very much more aware of it, and so I sometimes think of it, it's kind of like that in my head, that if I can see that it's not the outside things that are affecting me anymore, then it's just my thoughts about them, then it's really helped me to not take those thoughts so seriously, because that's what got me into a really, really dark place after my muggings and the attacks, is I thought I took those thoughts seriously, and I got stuck in a loop of reliving and where it became real. And now I can, I'm human. I can have a funky day or hurt feelings or something, and it's such a freedom to not have to take it seriously, or can catch myself before it gets, into too much of a painful place that I'm then maybe believing or acting out on it or affecting other people with it. That to me is a huge liberation. So, and now in the work I'm doing, working as a practitioner, it's, actually pointing other people in that direction also is a great opportunity and a privilege too. Yeah.
So if there was somebody listening to this call and maybe they'd had a similar experience to you, or even if it wasn't that particular experience, something had traumatized them, what could you offer to them in the way of hope and this understanding?
I think what I've seen, because I'd already started getting well, thank God, before I came across these principles, but the people I've worked with since then, I've really seen that how much possibility there is to be free of it. because I think that for example, I'm in a few Facebook groups where there's like support groups for PTSD and trauma sufferers, purely out of like, they're called support groups, so I want to go in and give support. It's not always very well received, because the general feeling out there is a lot of comparing labels and comparing diagnoses, and the traditional world of treatment for PTSD is very much about reliving the event, so that you can like almost like an exorcism, like you can kind of like, there's a belief that if you kind of neutralize yourself to it if you keep reliving it and reliving it. And I remember when I was still in Manchester after the second mugging, and my family doctor kind of picked up that I really wasn't doing very well and sent me to the psychiatrist at Manchester Royal Infirmary. And I only went a couple of times, because when I remember it took me at least 2 panic attacks just to get there. I was in such a bad place. And I sat in front of the psychiatrist, and she just, all she could do was ask me to talk about it. And I was thinking, but I was doing that at home. That's why I'm here. Can you like show me how to not think about it? That's what I needed help with. I can think about it over and over again really well at home. Right? I'm really good at that. And that's what's making me crazy and ill. And she didn't have any other solutions. And so, and that was like almost 30 years ago. And from the people I meet now who are, dealing with trauma more recently, that's still the MO, is to get people to journal about it and relive it and do drama workshops on it, and we'll act it out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like re-torturing someone all over again. And here in Israel, we have an organization called Hatzalah. It means rescue in English. And it's kind of like our first responder system. Like if you call the emergency number, you'll get through to the call center, and they'll send out, the paramedics or the police or the fire department. And Israel's the first country in the world to have a psychotrauma and crisis unit. So I volunteered for this unit, and so we had some training, and it's such a brilliant idea. I mean, like, why? It's only been going about 2 or 3 years now. So what happens is, if someone calls the emergency number, the call center will assess whether someone could be traumatized, and they'll send someone from our unit to go out and stabilize someone in the situation. Because unfortunately we have a lot of trauma here. And so it's like countries around the world now are actually asking, it's so effective and such an amazing thing that other countries are asking us to like train them and share this experience and this training. And so it's like one of the first things I learned in that training was that if someone is stabilized in the moment, they're 80% less chance of getting PTSD afterwards. I mean, I'll leave the label PTSD over there, and we could talk about that another time. But that, when I heard that statistic, it kind of like, it fit really well into this understanding, because stabilizing someone in the moment when they're having a trauma, you're bringing them back to the moment, and you're helping them not to get into that loop of reliving it. And so that's why the statistic made sense to me, because like after my traumas, I was just given a cup of tea and sent home. And so I went home, and I had wonderful friends, and the support was there, but I didn't know how to reach out. I didn't know how to ask for help at the beginning. And so I just sat and lived in it. And I'd say to anybody who's experiencing something like that, is that the more I stayed in that reliving the event, the more my autonomic stress response was set off, and so which sends more chemicals into your body, and the more stress, the more adrenaline and cortisol and glucose and all this stuff's going into your body, which makes you feel more ill, which then like just compounds it. And it's just like, like often principals, teachers will use the snow globe analogy. It's just like shaking up the snow globe over and over and over again, and my body and my brain never got a chance to settle. So I'd say if anybody is experiencing it, I can tell you that I got well. That's the first thing. And when I've worked with people, and it intuitively comes to me is to not ask them about what happened. Obviously if they need to talk about it, that's fine, but not to go over it and over it and digging around the past, like Sydney Banks talked about, like that the answer is not in the past. What I want to do is help them come to the moment, because in this moment right here, right now, you're okay. You're actually safe here. And just that little few moments of safety kind of like slow the thinking down enough where the wisdom and the resilience can actually come through, and the healing starts to happen. So that's kind of how I would work with someone now. Yeah.
Yeah, I know one of the things sometimes when I have clients and they come and they're like, oh, do you want me to tell my story? And I'm like, if you want to, but if you don't want to, I'm good not to know anything about you apart from what I can see
Right.
in front of me.
Yeah.
And often I think you're right that it is still practice to ask people to relive what has happened to them. Tell me what was the worst thing that happened to you. And I think then it's quite refreshing for people when you're kind of saying, if you feel it will help you, share, but if not, we absolutely to understand this and to move forward and to have a great life afterwards. You don't need to share that if it doesn't feel helpful to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've had clients say like call me the next day and say, thank you so much for not making me talk about it. Like I had a peaceful night's sleep last night for the first time in years because in fact, I wrote about that in the book, about how that kind of approach to therapy often sets people off into more, overthinking and distress. It's like causes it. In fact, on these Facebook groups, I see these girls and they're like, I've got my EMDR session tomorrow and I'm so terrified. Last time I had to take a week off work because of it. And I'm like, then why would you do it? They go, oh, it works. I'm like, and I try and make suggestions and they go, no, my therapy really works. It just like messes me up for a week afterwards each time. I'm like, okay, because that's kind of like the standard out there. In fact, when we were training, in the psychotrauma unit, we had a lecture from an EMDR specialist. For those of you who don't know, it's like it's based on eye movement, and it's a therapy that people use to like help people's brains settle down. Which, anyway, my teacher said, this teacher who was an expert in EMDR, he said, the regular protocol, like the CBT approach, is 120 hours of treatment of making people relive it. We only do it for 5 hours. And I'm like, I went up to him in the break and I said, how is that ethically allowed to torture someone for 120 hours? And he said, yeah, we only do it for 5. And I'm like, I've had conversations that only lasted 2 hours and the people are free. It's like, so, it breaks my heart when I see, how, because insurance is involved and all these kind of things, that's the standard method of care, and I just want to scream, like, you don't have to put yourself through that. If you could just understand what's happening to you, there's so much freedom available and it's so less painful. And but slowly we're carrying the message and helping people to come to these ideas. So like your webinar, it's great to make it more available to people, for sure.
Yeah, it's good to get it out there. I know I love to share the simplicity of this understanding, because I think innocently, through those kinds of things that we've been doing for so long, we have accidentally been taught to really hold tightly onto our stories. Because like, it's interesting what you saying about being quite scared to let go of your story at some point, because I think when we've been told that we've identified so strongly with our story, and by being asked to repeat what our story is and look through it and do it kind of almost concretes that. It almost says, yeah, that's who you are, that's your story. And it can be quite difficult to let it go sometimes, can't it?
Yeah.
So it's really, I think it's incredibly helpful to stop that and to kind of say, hey, yeah, your story can go, it's fine. Right, so I could carry on just talking to you like this forever, but I'm aware that there are other people here, and maybe people, they may have questions, they may have comments or anything. So if anyone is here if anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, share something with Hannah, is that right? Then please feel free to unmute yourself, or because most people haven't got their cameras on, so you can't put your hand up and me unmute you. So, but there is a button in the corner of your screen, and you should be able to unmute yourself if you want to comment or ask a question. So please feel free to jump in if you'd like to do that. It's good to make it into a conversation and not just have me hugging you the whole time.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Katie. Hi.
Hi. It's really funny because I don't actually know how to pronounce your name. Is it Chana?
Hannah. Hannah, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I didn't actually know you were going to be on this webinar tonight, and it's really funny because I only kind of met Hannah, like not met, like made contact with you like a couple of weeks ago. So I've actually read the book this week.
Oh,
so
yeah?
really exciting. And yeah, it was it's quite a journey to read. It's like at the beginning when the the attacks happen, you're just like, oh, it gets you. and then it's brilliant because you kind of, I was kind of believing, well, like, of course it looks scary now, and like even I was feeling scared on my couch, going like, I don't want to go outside now, and believe in those thoughts of how does somebody come back from that. That's what happens when you kind of get absorbed in that kind of thing, and then to like kind of see Debra in the book come back from it was really great. And it was really interesting to see like all the things that Debra learned from, or you. It's really hard to know because it's a bit of a mix, isn't it? But I think,
yeah, I'd say about 85% is true. I'd say of the book, about 85%. Yeah.
Yeah, to see like the understanding like coming from somewhere else. I think I find that really exciting, and also like if you've been in the community to kind of work out like, oh, is that Dr. Pettit? It's really exciting to see kind of history kind of embedded in secret little pockets.
Yeah.
And what I also really enjoyed was because you kind of lay out some like sessions you had with people, or Debra had with people, and they're just really fascinating. Like, I'd love to read more people doing that, because it's just like you see the story and then you see the unraveling and the kind of falling away of all this other stuff, and then the blossoming, and that was really enjoyable. And at the same time, Debra's really human, and that's like it wasn't like a wizard coming in doing wizardry,
right?
It was like a human person looking in direction, and that's what happened. And that was very exciting.
Right, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah.
I don't actually have a question though.
I explained everything, right?
Great, thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Because one of the other things I did in the book was I mixed in a lot of my Hollywood stories, and because it was really funny when I came across the principles first, and I started like looking people up on YouTube, and I noticed how I kept coming across these situations where a teacher would say, like, imagine a tiger walked into the room, and you'd be scared, and then you'd find out it was a puppet. And I'm like, I made a lion for George of the Jungle. That was my job, right? And my whole job was to convince you something was real, and it was made of fur and wire and latex and whatever we were using. And then like the next teacher would say, imagine a tiger walked in the room, and you'd be terrified until you realized it wasn't real. And I'm like, I made a tiger for Dr. Dolittle with Eddie Murphy. And everybody thought it was real, because for insurance reasons they can't have Eddie Murphy and a real tiger in the same room. So it's like, duh, you've got to, people are like, really, it wasn't real? I'm like, no, it can't be. Could you imagine getting a tiger to lie on an operating table? So that was our puppet, and so that was, it's also a really good way of like teaching the principals to talk about the special effects, and how we often, get fooled and convinced that something is real when really it's not. That was my job for 20 years, like fooling people into thinking things were real and they weren't. That was my job. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thought does that incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if the film industry could get hold of how thought convinces us, then the special effects would blow our minds even more than they do, even though we've already been convinced it would be.
Right. Yeah.
Thought does that job incredibly well. And even when I guess if you watch those films, if you watch Dr. Dolittle, does the tiger look real to you when you watch it?
It's interesting because people have asked me that, doesn't it like spoil watching movies now because you know how it's done? And no, I mean, whenever there's an animal in a movie, I always can tell where the animal trainer is, because the animal is looking for the clicking noise or the food, the smell of, that's how they train them. So if you watch anything like for example, Downton Abbey, for example, there was a white Labrador in Downton Abbey. Whenever he's following, Hugh Bonneville around, like Lord Grantham, that Hugh Bonneville has some chicken in his hand, like I know that, that's just the way they do it, because like the dog would wander off somewhere else. He wouldn't be that interested in him, he's not an actor, of kind. And so remember the movie, the TV show Frasier with an American TV show, and anyway, there's a little dog in that, and if you watch, the dog is always slightly looking off camera because the animal trainer is going like this, just behind the camera to get their attention. So whenever I watch things, I do kind of like think like that, but it's more in an admiration for their talent and their skill, then it doesn't spoil it for me. But you never want to watch one of my movies with me, because I'll be going, I'm right there, I'm under that table, I'm behind there. Like that's where I'm terrible to watch my movies with, because I'll just spoil it. I'll talk all the way through and explain, oh, that's the day we lost the thing and we couldn't find it, so we had to make another one in 5 minutes,
I think that's brilliant, and I think that actually really describes what happens when you begin to get a tiny inkling into these principles. I just think your world, it becomes different. It's no less amazing. The effects, like you said, I'm guessing if you watch Downton Abbey, it's no less enjoyable, but it's just a different experience.
Right.
I don't know those things.
Right.
And that to me has been my experience of this understanding. It's just like, I absolutely love my life. I have a blast. I really think it's great, but things just look different, but not worse or better. They just look different. It just
right.
on a whole different.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's a great analogy, and and sometimes we're taken in, and sometimes we can see where the animal trainer is, or the thought trainer is. Sometimes we go, oh yeah, I can see what's going on there. And sometimes we completely lose ourselves in life and entirely forget that it's anything.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great analogy. So has anyone else got any questions they would like to ask? Feel free to unmute yourself and make a comment, join in the conversation, ask a question.
No, that's one.
Oh, Lucy's here in the back.
There's always one in the back.
Yeah. So,
hi, this is Linda. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Hi. I wanted to ask. You said that you had doubts.
So I couldn't hear you.
You had doubts while, or you felt very vulnerable while writing the book. And I asked myself, what gave you the feeling that you can hold on, or what made you hold on or keep the process going and kept you writing, kept you at the table and write?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So it took a while to write, because like I said, it started out as a self-help book back in probably 10 years ago, before I came across the principles. And when I I actually wrote it as a self-help book, you know, how to get rid of your mythical low self-esteem. And, you know, it's all techniques and methods, because I was a certified life coach at the time, and so that's what I knew. But I remember reading it thinking, no one's going to listen to this, because it was very like preachy and teachy, right? And so I thought, that's not going to be helpful. And so that's when it occurred to me to put it all into a novel, because then my characters could do the teaching and the preaching and the discovering and the growing. So it was definitely an evolution of ideas. And then I really didn't tell anybody I was writing it, because I was afraid of the judgment, which is, you know, totally happening in my head. Nobody was judging me. I was afraid that they would. And, you know, because it sounded very pompous, you know, oh, I'm writing a book, you know. In my head, it sounded pompous. And so I didn't really discuss it with anybody. But what I found was there were times when it would just come. And for me, the most interesting times was when I was actually writing fiction, because when I was writing about things that had happened to me, it was just like the stories I've been telling people for years, I was just putting them down on paper now. But when I actually had to create some actual fiction, this was going into like new waters for me, and like very much like undiscovered country. And I loved it, because I had the most incredible experiences where I'd sit down at the computer and I had a few characters and I had to get them from here and over there. And I needed a story to help them get from here to there. And I would start writing, and it was almost trippy in a way of like, you know, the story would just come off the end of my fingers when I'm typing. I'm like, wow, I didn't know this was gonna happen to her, and I didn't know. And it was almost like mind, whatever you want to call it, had already knew what the story was going to be, like had already seen the movie, as it were, knew the ending, and was just like channeling it through me. And I can tell you, there were days when I just had nothing. You know, there were days when I've got like 3 hours now. I could write for 3 hours before my students arrive, or before, you know, I need to go out or do something. And I'd sit there and go, nothing. Right? and there were other times when it would go bum, 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 like it would come so fast. And I had to leave, or I had someone coming over, and it was like, it just wasn't convenient. Can you stop? Because I'm having a creative flow right now. And, you know, and it was like, right to the last minute, I'm still typing, and I got to get this thing out before I forget. And so I learned just to go with the flow of either one of those situations, and to not interpret one as good and one as bad. It's just, that's how it was on that day. So I'm not sure if tell me if I'm answering your question. So I just, I just kind of learned not to judge, you know, what was actually happening. And it was kind of like my own little kind of private roller coaster of like, let's see how it's going to be today. And there were times when, you know, or I'd be in a situation where I'd get an idea and I wasn't able to write it down, or I wasn't, you know, near the computer. And I like at the bus stop or something, and I'd be going, oh wow, and then this could happen, and maybe, oh yeah, she knew this one, and so now I'm writing my second novel, and I have moments when I just can't stop writing, and then I haven't touched it in 2 weeks, you know. So, and I've learned not to get scared about that, because when it's meant to come, it will come, and when it doesn't, that's okay too, because I'm probably supposed to be doing something else. So, you know, and there's plenty of other things to be doing. So it's like, yeah, I find it exciting. And so the vulnerability really only came when it was time for other people to see it and read it. And that was a little bit scary at first. And then I just like, you know, get over yourself, and I've already moved on to the next thing, which is the best way to deal with it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really cool for me to hear, because I, in the moment, also try to write a book, a crime story, and but in the moment, for example, I'm also in a mood where I'm like, oh, I want to let it drop, and I don't want to go further with the book, because I don't know, it's so complicated, and I don't know where I have to go with the figure, with all the figures, and the with my heroes, and there are a lot of parts where I want to just throw it away, and in the
Yeah, I had those moments too.
So it was really cool to see how enthusiastic you were, and that it's totally normal to have these these periods where it's where you hate it and
and the editing is horrible. The writing part was actually the easy part, the enjoyable part. The editing was quite challenging, but even that I learned so much that the next one, then it'll be hopefully much easier, because it was like I was doing things I'd never done before, and so how to deal with Amazon and how to deal with formatting and making a cover, and it was like such a learning curve, and I'm so so grateful, and because people would say to me, who designed your cover? I'm like, I did. Who's your publicist? Oh, that would be me. It was like, so it was I learned so much, and I'm kind of really excited, like the next one, that I'll be able to enjoy it more, because it'll, I'm sure there'll be other things to learn, but I think the most important thing is not to judge each of those separate experiences, and just to be in them as they're happening.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when nothing comes out of my hands, or I sit in front of my notebook and just get up and go to the kitchen and do everything but not write, then I really get angry at the principals. Like, I know about the principles, and still I don't want to write, or I don't know, and
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Lucy, did you want to ask a question?
I was going to ask if she self-published, but it sounds like you did.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Lucy is in the process of writing a book at the moment as well. 6 books, actually. Yes, she's not long been on a writer's retreat, and she's come back full of enthusiasm and is planning 6 books. So we're just and so I think a lot of what you were saying, she's kind of going, yes, tell me. So keep going, Linda, keep going. We're all in this together.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think we might have time to squeeze in one more question if there is one. We've got about 10 minutes, so we're okay. So does anyone else like to ask a question or make a comment or share anything about anything that's gone on this evening? Silence.
So if no one has a question, I'd love to tell you about what I'm doing now.
I would love that. Yes, that would be brilliant.
Because I've kind of just shifted into a whole new area, and and it just happened yesterday, and so I'm really excited about this. Well, I mean, I started a new project yesterday. So when I went through all these muggings, I had a lot of physical injuries, and so I actually had chronic back pain for 20 years. Like I said, my neck was broken, and then I had 3 herniated discs, at least that's what I was told. And, and I would have, over the last 20 years, have moments of absolute agony. I'd have these episodes of being in chronic back pain, spasms that would then set off the sciatic nerve, and the pain shooting down my legs. I was actually paralyzed several times, where I actually lost movement in the whole of my butt, like from my chest down. I remember looking at my feet, and they're just not going to move. And it's kind of frightening, because you think, like, maybe this time I'm not going to get the feeling back in my legs, and I'm going to be in a wheelchair after I have surgery. And I was going to the chiropractor every month for 20 years, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. When I was having an episode, I was a teacher for 5 years in an elementary school in LA, and I was walking around with a hot water bottle on my back a lot of the time, and ice packs lying on the floor. If any of you've had back pain, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so when I came across the principles, and I decided to do some training, and I actually did the One Thought training in London with Aaron Turner. And there's some expense to doing a course, and I had to fly backwards and forwards from Israel to London to be present for different seminars. And when I was flying, I wasn't working, so there was a lot of added expense at that time. So I kind of looked around my budget, and I thought, what could I save money on? So I thought, I haven't had any back pain for a while now, so maybe I'll just cut the chiropractor out. And so I did. And then after I finished one thought, I was thinking, this is interesting. I haven't had any back pain for like 2 or 3 years now. I couldn't remember the last really bad episode I'd had. And I thought, that's interesting. That's about how long I've been around the principles, right? So I'm thinking, this is curious, right? So I was telling a friend about this, and she said to me, have you ever heard of Dr. Sarno? And I was like, no, who's that? So I don't know, maybe some of your listeners have heard of Dr. Sarno. He was a medical doctor, a rehabilitation medicine doctor in New York, as part of the University Hospital. And he did this amazing research, and he saw the connection between stress and back pain. And it's a fascinating subject. And it just kind of like, it just fits so well into my experience. Only Dr. Sarno and the people who are into the mind-body thing, like, he pushed everybody into a kind of a Freudian psychoanalysis answer to why they're stressed and they're getting this back pain. And I'm thinking, no. I know a better answer, right?
Well, this bit now, let me give you this bit.
Right. It's so much less work. Right? And so I just did a course with Dr. Bill Pettit. He just did a mind-body course, which is amazing, like listening and working, with him for like the last 6 weeks. And so understanding this connection, it's like the mind is so powerful. I mean, I always knew that, and because like Dr. Sarno would say how, remember in the 80s, like businessmen all had ulcers, like, they're stressed businessmen and everybody had stomach ulcers. Well, where did all the stomach ulcers go? Because then it was suddenly carpal tunnel. Everybody had carpal tunnel. and now it's back pain. I mean, like, it's, how does your body know that what's in vogue? These things are going in.
The fashionable illness.
Exactly. And I can tell you, the pain is real. The pain is real because it's all in your head. I'm like, well, yeah, it's kind of in my head from a principal's point of view, but it's also, I'm in agony. And his explanation is that when you're stressed, it affects your nervous system and your autonomic system. And so it interferes with the blood flow. And if your blood's not flowing correctly, then it's not taking oxygen to those muscles. And it's the oxygen deprivation that's actually causing the pain. And it says it's very mild. It's not like some scary thing. It's only like 5% less oxygen than what you really should have. And that's what's causing the pain and causing the muscles to tense up. And that's all coming from stress. And we know stress is coming from thought. And so I was like, interesting. I want to see if I can replicate this experience that I've had where I'm now pain-free. I mean, I haven't had any back pain in like 4 years now, except for I was reading one of these books on this Dr. Sarno's approach to this idea, and it was about 2 inches thick. It was written by a man called Steve Ozanich, who's one of his famous patients who took it to Howard Stern, and lots of actors and stuff have gotten like free of their back pain by using this method. And for the 2 days I was reading the book, my back went out. And what used to happen to me before is my pelvis tilts, and I can't stand up straight, and the pain was, I laughed my head off because here I was, I had been pain-free for about 3 years. I'm reading a book about back pain, and my back goes out. The connection between my thoughts and what was happening in my body was so clear that I laughed because I knew as soon as I finished reading the book, the pain would go away, and it did. It was like a little experiment. And so I was thinking, I wonder if I can recreate this in clients. So last week I put out on my local Facebook pages here where I live, does anybody suffering back pain, would you like to be part of a research program? So I got some help from other 3 Principles people who are doing research into their work. And so I put together a questionnaire and some paperwork, and I've been inundated with people. I mean, people are suffering with back pain. Like the statistics are, there's billions of dollars, $600 billion are spent a year in America on back pain, surgeries and treatments and disability. And I've probably been getting like 12 to 15 responses a day of people just in the city where I live saying, help me, I've been in agony for 20 years, 30 years, it's back pain, it's shoulder pain, knee pain. And so I started with my first client yesterday of this research program. And so I kind of worked out, I realized if people don't know about the principles, to do an intensive might be a bit intimidating. So I kind of like shrunk it down and put it into like 2-hour sessions. And we had 2 hours on Tuesday night, and then this morning we had 2 hours and then a break and another 2 hours. And she's coming back tomorrow. I'm so excited. And she's already told me, this woman's been suffering with back pain for 20, 30 years. And she's already told me that she feels better. She doesn't understand why. And she doesn't get the principles yet. And I've been talking for hours and hours today. But she's coming back tomorrow. That's what's so exciting. You know, I thought maybe she'll think I'm some kind of kook and like, you know, like not come back. But she's really interested. And I've already got someone booked for next week. And by the time the conference comes in London, I'll be at the conference. So hopefully I'll have met with somebody every week, and we'll have like been able to put together some research. And because when you're in that kind of pain, it's hard to live. You know, it stops you from going to work. It stops you picking up your kids. You know, it's such a disability. And to be able to help people get free of that just by understanding these principles, meaning they don't have to take the drugs and they don't have to do the surgeries and they don't have to do, you know, endless exercises and endless trips to the chiropractor and the acupuncture. And if anybody's listening, if that stuff works for you, amazing, keep doing it. I'm so grateful that my chiropractors kept me out of the operating theater and out of a wheelchair. But now it's like, it's just the freedom that comes with that. It's like, even in your body, you know, like freedom from pain is like, I'm very excited about it. And I can't wait to see, you know, what happens. Hopefully she, you know, and she said to me when she left today, she says, I really feel like you just want me to get well. I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, because it was interesting, because like the ladies I've worked with a trauma, they're like, then they tell me the stories that they've experienced with therapists and psychiatrists torturing them. I kind of thought, you know, it's maybe the same with doctors. It's like, and innocently, like the doctors also, I believe, want them to get well. But, you know, there's also a lot of money involved, and I've asked for volunteers. You know, hopefully I will charge for this later when I've kind of worked it out. But she really picked up on that, you know, that I could see that she can get well, and she's picking up on that I believe she can get well, and it's helping her to see that too.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And our minds in those ways are absolutely amazing. I mean, I've got a little story from when I was a child, and it's kind of in the same vein, but I've got a younger brother, and he was asthmatic from very, very tiny. And a few times when he was very, very tiny, he was admitted to hospital and he almost died because his asthma was so bad.
Yeah.
And then when we were in school and he was a little bit older, he got to the point, and he would just, if ever he wanted any time off school, he knew how to have an asthma attack. He had totally worked out how this worked in his body, and he would wind himself up and have a genuine asthma attack. You know, he would have to have medication. He would have to be seen by a doctor. But he knew, and so there was nothing false about his asthma attack.
Yeah.
And yet he just said, he would just say to me, oh, on Thursday I'm not going to go to school. I'm going to be too poorly to go to school. And I'd be like, what? You know, and he could do this. He knew how to do this. And it's
so I'm laughing because I did the same thing. My thing was allergies. I've had chronic allergies since I was 5 years old. You know, every summer, you know, like the streaming eyes, the nose, you know, like couldn't breathe. My school bag was like a pharmacy in high school, and had the injections. I had a surgery when I was 17, and I also knew how to get out of what cross country. Remember, like in high school, like cross country running. I don't want to do that. I could bring on. I got me out of swimming. You know, like I could make I just rubbed my eyes a little bit, and boom, like, you know, they're swollen. I used to use it. But the amazing thing is that my back pain's gone away, and I suddenly thought, because right now is allergy season where I live. I'm allergic to cypress trees and olive trees, which, living in the Middle East, it's like it was surrounded by these trees. So, and right now is when they're blooming. The pollen is in the air right now. And so it's about a 2-month period where everybody here is sneezing like crazy, and their eyes are streaming. And so I suddenly thought, this is interesting. And we were doing the course with Dr. Bill Pettit, and I said, and he was talking about the immune system and the inflammatory and all this stuff. And I was like, I wonder if my allergies will go away too. And I kind of like thought about it, and I'm not sneezing. Like right now, every year of the 10 years I've lived here, right now, my eyes would be swollen. I'd be sneezing. I'll be coughing. I can't breathe. and I can breathe, and my allergies have gone away. I'm so excited for next year to see when allergy season comes, to see if it holds up, because once I get the back pain program going, then I'll see if I can help you with allergies. Because I was so glad you said that, because people who are experiencing physical things, allergies, asthma, I'm working with a client right now who's covered in eczema. It's like just painful to look, because her stress is coming out in her body. It's coming out in her skin, and it's quite common to, you know, if and I'm thinking about it now, that when I had the allergies, I actually didn't have back pain. Like, the brain is so smart. It's like, well, if you're not going to be fooled by that, then we'll try this. And I had, in fact, that's what I missed all my O-level, mock O-levels, because I had eczema when I was a teenager, and it got me out of all my exams. I mean, I don't think I know I didn't consciously do that.
So there's
I'm not
for you.
right, I'm not that smart. But it makes sense now that I was 14 years old, it was time for mock exams, and oh, look at that, I can't go to school because I'm covered in a terrible rash. You know, it's like, you know, this unresolved thought, you know, it comes out in our bodies sometimes if you know, we're not dealing with it.
It is amazing what clears up for us when we come across this understanding, you know, what falls away without us doing anything, even being aware of that. It is amazing. Yeah, the physical health side of things always fascinates me too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really great chatting to you tonight. I could carry on for hours, and we will absolutely have to catch up with this again, you know, to see where this all goes, because I would be really interested. And I know the research and sorting these things out, I bet that's I would imagine that Bexy has pricked up around that. Yeah, that is amazing. It's wonderful. So thank you so much for being here
Pleasure.
this evening. So, Beck, what am I supposed to be?
Well, we'll see you at Ticken.
Oh yeah, we'll see you at Ticken. Yeah,
Yes, I just saw on the schedule. I'm speaking about PTSD with Judy Sedgman. I am so excited. I feel it's a great. Yeah, I know. I feel really honored. Yeah, so I just saw that on the schedule. So yeah. So any of you who are in London, come and say hello. Yes, I'm so excited. Looking forward to being there.
The conference in London. So we will see you there. What else am I supposed to?
29th May, Sam Winslow.
Oh yeah, so our next lovely people webinar is the 29th of May, and it will be the lovely Sam Winslow, who is also an amazing lady. So I get to speak to all these amazing ladies. It's fabulous. Great job I have. And if anyone, just at the moment, we have just started to do a lot of new stuff in our business too, and we've just put out 4 new videos, all talking about the areas that we've kind of been seeing things in. So if anyone isn't on our mailing list and would like to join up to get those videos, go to our website, Dare to Be You, and join up, or you know, get in touch and ask us. But so it would be lovely to see you there, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody, and hopefully see you all again soon. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.